Hi everyone, this is Beth Schultz, Vice President of Research and Principal Analyst at Metrigy, along with my colleague Robin Gareiss, who is CEO and Principal Analyst, and we would like to welcome you to our latest MetriSight podcast. In this episode, we'll be focusing on customer experience transformation, and Robin will share some key data points from a research study that she's just putting the finishing touches on this week. Robin, hello.
Hey Beth, happy to be here.
So Robin, we've been talking about CX transformation for, it really does seem like forever, right?
Definitely.
So before we talk about the study itself, why don't you give us a little bit of kind of your take on CX transformation in 2022? What does it mean?
Well, I guess probably means different things to different people, that's for sure. I mean, we certainly have our own definition of what we say CX transformation actually means. As we look at it, first of all, we just say it's the innovative application of either new or existing technologies to improve customer and or agent experience to ultimately drive measurable business value. So it's just an act of using technology to make some sort of improvement, and that improvement, has to be measurable. So if you don't have any measurable improvement, you haven't really had a transformation. Now, I've done work on digital transformation projects for a number of years, and it seems like the majority of digital transformation projects do end up being customer focused in nature. So we've really honed in on customer experience or CX transformation projects. And what we found in this year's research is that more than half of companies either will have a CX transformation project complete or underway by the end of 2022. And not real surprisingly, the highest percentage of those are larger companies with more than 2,500 employees. That doesn't mean that smaller companies aren't also transforming. In fact, I think with smaller companies, it's really good for them because this technology can really level the playing field between them and a larger company. So, you do see it with smaller companies, but, and in some cases, I think a lot of smaller companies may view, we're just implementing a new technology. We don't view this as a transformation project, whereas larger companies, I think oftentimes use that terminology more like, oh yes, we're in a transformation, and there's a lot of operational processes that go along with it, whereas smaller companies are a little more nimble. They're like, yeah, we're rolling this out, and yeah, of course, it increased revenue by 40%, and it, improved CSAT by 80%, but they don't look at it as transformation when in fact it really is. The other thing I would say with CX transformation that I have found interesting in doing this research, so for the past 3 years, we have found that customer service is the number one business priority when you stack it up against a bunch of other business priorities, things like increasing revenue, improving information security, reducing costs, there's a whole long list of basically business priorities. And for 3 straight years, and it could be longer, we've only been measuring it for 3 years, customer service has actually been the number one business priority. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand. If that's your top business priority, that's where you're going to really be focusing on transformative initiatives, or where technology can really make a difference, or how I can take technology, change an operational process, or automate an operational process, and ultimately derive business value from that.
Okay, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So, you've given us that one sort of data point, more than half of companies will have a CX transformation project complete or underway by the end of 2022, right? But tell us a little bit more about the study so we can sort of have some other more context around the data points that this year going on.
Yeah, so like you said earlier, I'm literally just putting the finishing touches on this. We're starting to do some briefings to our clients this week, and we also have a series of webinars on our Bright Talk channel. So if you're not a part of Bright Talk, that's a really great place to get tons of information. You just go to brighttalk.com, you register, it's free, and you have just access to an incredible amount of content, not just from us, but from all kinds of companies out there. So that's going on. I just did the first one of those as well. But the research project itself, we conducted this research in March and April, so it's very, very new data. We had 724 companies who participated, either in survey or interview, and it's a global study. So we looked at North America, which we included U.S. and Canada, and then Western Europe primarily. So you've got like UK, some Ireland, France, Germany. There's some Italy in there, so a few countries there. And then Asia Pac, which was Australia. I think we had some New Zealand in there, India, Japan, Singapore, those types of countries. So we had a nice cross-section of all different titles. So it's not just IT or technology titles, it's also the C-suite in there. You've got, you've got security people in there, you've got business leaders in there, chief customer officers, sales and marketing people. So it's a really nice, well-rounded study from different perspectives as to how companies are transforming their customer experience. And we just covered a whole bunch of things in that study. It's pretty cool.
Okay, so, based on the study then, tell us what are the top CX transformation projects that you're seeing?
Well, there's a lot of them, I will say that. So I will be covering that in briefings and in upcoming webinars and stuff. But the top ones that we see, and they change from year to year, the number one right now is adding cloud-based applications. And I think that really does go hand in hand with so many organizations. First of all, moving to the cloud moving their contact center to the cloud during the pandemic, and now that they have that established, they're seeing all the different cloud-based applications that they can be adding to their portfolio. So that's just generally one of the top transformational projects. We want to either move from an on-premise environment and, replace on-premises applications with cloud-based applications, or we simply just want to add new cloud-based applications. There's so much innovation going on right now in CX that it's like a lot of companies just can't get your hands on some of these new apps in the AI space, the analytics space, the agent experience space, just simple things like scheduling, which aren't actually that simple. All sorts of things there that you can get in the cloud, and they're really flexible and good applications. So that's number one. The second one was improving customer self-service capabilities, and that's been at the top for a few years now. We definitely see companies wanting to make self-service better. Yes, they want their agents there. They want their agents to handle interactions when it makes sense. But whether you're a customer or an agent at a company, it's like when you can go in and do something on your own very quickly, I'm like 5 stars for me. It's just like, if you've made this experience and this interaction easy for me and I've gotten it done in 3 minutes rather than sitting on hold for 14 minutes and then having to go back and forth with an agent, and it's really a simple thing I needed to do, that's great. So you certainly see companies dealing with self-service capabilities, and that can include your knowledge management system. That's sort of the foundation of that. It could include doing more with virtual assistants, doing more with FAQs and just the content in a knowledge management system. So there's all sorts of things you can do there with self-service. And that, just percentage-wise, we saw about 41.5% of companies adding cloud-based applications. We see 38.3% improving customer self-service capabilities. We see about 34.5% establishing high-performance work-from-home capabilities. Now, the ability to just have that strong network and an application performance foundation, that was number one last year. But this year, it's moved down a little bit, I think, as companies have gotten that problem resolved. And it's interesting because in any other time, that would just be like table stakes. It wouldn't be considered transformative. But when you've got all of a sudden all these people moving to home offices in record time, you're going to see some problems with network performance, with audio performance, with video performance, all of that. So that still is something that companies view as transformative. And just, in some respects, it might be how they're handling their operational processes with IT, could be what kind of tools they're using in home offices, so there's a lot of ways you have to look at home offices that you didn't before because it was, maybe a backup, or it wasn't something that you did as much with customers. So that's another area. Another top one is adding analytics to improve agent performance. We saw about 33% of companies doing that. I'm a big proponent of analytics and data and taking that information and improving anything, whether it's agent performance, whether it's CSAT, whether it's costs, whether it's revenue, whatever it might be. Using analytics is really important. But specifically here, it's all about agent performance. So making sure that your agents not only are efficient, but they're effective. And I think there's differences there. In years past, it was like, be efficient. Get on and off a call quickly. Now it's, let's be effective. Let's get on and off that call as quickly as possible. Maybe it'll take longer than before, but you've got the customer's problem solved in the first call. That's important, so it gets to those types of things. But also just their overall performance. How can we make them more empathetic? How can we make agents more targeted, more focused? How can we help them to use screen pops and things like that? So kind of these projects, it's interesting. They're kind of, in all different subcategories of CX. The next one is actually improving fraud prevention. About 32% of companies just wanting to improve fraud prevention in the contact center. There's a lot of different areas there where you can deal with toll fraud, you can deal with identity theft, you can deal with identity management. There's all sorts of things that companies are looking at there as well. And then the last one I'll point out, and believe me, there's a much longer list than this. I know I've gone over a lot already. It's just the integration of of contact center with UC or CRM or CPaaS, all those areas. So about 31% are saying that's part of their that is their transformation project, is just that integration. So, and then we get to all different things like AI, voice of the customer, agent scheduling initiatives, visual engagement. There's all sorts of other things there, but, those are sort of the top transformation areas. And like I said, it's kind of cool because they cover different areas. You've got adding apps, you've got specifics on self-service, you've got foundational performance capabilities, analytics, fraud, we get into the security space, and then integration. So a lot of different areas kind of in those top tier projects that we see companies doing now.
I like that bit you said about analytics, being effective versus just being efficient. Mm-hmm. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So, earlier you had said that you can't really have CX transformation without, measuring against your key metrics, right? So, and obviously, measuring success is really important to us as well in our studies. So, tell us a little bit about the success metrics that you looked for CX transformation. And kind of what were some of the most significant findings around success metrics in this study?
Okay, so with our research success metrics, what we typically do, let me explain that first so people who haven't seen our research understand what we're talking about here. So when we look at research success metrics, we look at 4 different areas. We look at revenue, operational costs, customer experience, so that's kind of measured by ratings, your CSAT score, your NPS score, whatever you're looking at, and then agent productivity. And in this particular study, we looked at a few key technologies, and we asked organizations, what were your before and after success metrics when you implemented these technologies? And we basically lined them up from best to worst, draw a line in the middle, and anybody who was in the top half in at least 2 of the areas that we measured, we put 2 of the technology areas, that is, we flagged as sort of our successful companies. They were able to measure business success and do so better than others. And so the 4 technology areas that we looked at were conversational AI, visual engagement, which is video, screen sharing, and co-browsing, workforce engagement management or workforce optimization, those kind of go hand in hand, and then self-service knowledge management tools. So we looked at those 4, sort of key areas, somewhat emerging or existing and improving. And we saw companies seeing, on average, around a 26%, 27% improvement in customer ratings across the board in all of them. We saw the highest increase in revenue when it came to self-service, believe it or not, because then you can get virtual assistants, pair those in with your self-service knowledge management base, and upsell and cross-sell to complementary products or to products that might make sense. So that was pretty cool. And we also saw, actually, that was the second top one by like 1/10 of a percentage point. The top one was actually visual engagement. We saw about a 22% improvement in revenue when you're able to be on video or actually see what somebody's talking about and maybe show them something or explain something in a visual way that makes them, make more purchases. Operational costs was another thing. So conversational AI actually reduced operational costs by the highest by about 16%, followed by visual engagement by about 15%. Workforce management and self-service knowledge bases, we didn't see a decrease in OpEx. We saw a small increase just as companies are investing more in these capabilities. And then the last one was agent productivity. So we saw, I think the biggest improvement was in visual engagement. We saw about a 28% improvement. 28% improvement in agent productivity when they used visual engagement. So we saw, a little bit lower improvements in agent productivity in the other areas. So those were, some of the things we saw from a an improvement standpoint in the areas that we looked at. The other thing I would point out that I think is really interesting is when you just look at spending on CX technology. So spending has and continues to be high in the amount that companies are putting towards CX. And just looking at our research success group versus the non-success group, you can see quite a difference in the amount they spent. So we normalize this data by taking their total spend and just dividing it by number of employees. So you can kind of get a normalization there. Our research success group is spending $26.90, so just under $2,700, just under $2,700 per employee on CX versus $1,400 per employee for the non-success group. So what this tells us is that there is a correlation with spending more and being successful. And I will say we don't always find that. There are certain areas, there are certain technologies that we've researched in the past, like some of the network-based, the WAN-based technologies, where when companies are spending less, when they've optimized their network or they're using some newer technologies, they're more successful. But in the CX space, that is not the case. When you're spending more, you're actually finding more success. So, I would say use those numbers as benchmarks. And we have those, by the way, broken down by size of companies, by industry. We can look at all different areas there if anyone wants to look at that. And it just kind of gives you a benchmark to say, okay, are we on track? Are we spending enough? Are we spending too much? I don't know if anyone would ever say they're spending too much, but are we not spending enough is sort of the big thing. And that using these numbers helps companies, and we have helped companies to get more budget by leveraging these numbers and, sort of showing, hey, we're falling behind.
Yeah, it's a great guide, a guide to what to do next. And
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of great information already, but I know that you've just really scratched the surface of
Mm-hmm.
what you found in this CX transformation research project. Any key points, other key points you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
I would say, as I mentioned, I started a series of webinars on our Bright Talk channel covering a variety of CX-related topics from this research. I mean, at this point, I think I have about 140 slides or something like that. So it's a lot of research, and I just keep adding to it. There's no end to the amount of correlations you can do in different ways to look at the data. So there's a lot of areas of interest. So just go look on our Bright Talk channel. You'll see the first couple already on there. I think we're doing a few more after that. So that's one way to get some information. Or, of course, just reach out to us and we can talk to you about how to work with us, which would always be great. I would say another, couple of interesting data points that we found in this research. More than 50% of CX technology buying decisions actually have a different decision maker and a different funder. So two different either people or groups making the decision on the technology and the provider and actually funding it. So, that really presents an interesting challenge, I think, not only for vendors on how they do their sales pitches, but for the enterprise organizations and just sort of the politics that go around that and the ways you have to all kind of work together and the infighting that honestly might go along. And we've seen it as we've done consulting projects with companies where, you've got, certain faction of the company really wants to go one direction, another faction wants to go another direction, and we get the wonderful duty of, trying to come in there objectively and say, well, here's what makes the most sense for your company. So that's certainly an issue that we see with companies right now. With that, I would say companies expect vendors to have sort of a well-oiled technology pitch as well as a business pitch. So that's one thing to consider. Other areas I would say that are kind of interesting is despite the growth in AI and virtual assistants, chatbots, whatever you call them, the number of agents in contact centers continues to grow. So I always hear that, oh my goodness, all the contact center agents are going to be out of jobs because of virtual assistants. I ask this question every year, and every year the largest percentage of companies is going to continue adding agents to their contact center. New business units pop up, or they're using the contact center more for upsell, cross-sell. There's all different reasons, that companies are increasing their numbers in contact centers. They're not increasing, it's a different type. They're hiring more, more strategic people, more experienced and educated people. They don't need someone to give you an overnight mailing address because clearly that's an advantage to having a virtual assistant. The virtual assistant can handle that easily. And the other thing I guess I would leave you with is nearly 60% of companies are adopting what we call like a digital first strategy. I don't know that I love the term digital because I feel like it's overused. And what does it really mean? Everybody has digital in their marketing literature, yet very few can explain what that actually means. We do have a definition for that in our research. And we talk to organizations about this whole digital first strategy, about 34.5% of interactions actually start in a channel other than voice. Of those, about 24% have to escalate to voice for completion. So it certainly isn't widespread as much as you'd think, right? We've done some research in the past that by this point they were expecting, upwards of 60% of transactions actually being handled in self-service, not necessarily only digital first, like a web chat or an SMS, two-way communication. So, it is moving along, but not quite as quickly as I think people were thinking just a few years ago.
Interesting. All right, well, thank you, Robin, so much for kind of giving us that some starting information on your CX transformation project, study, I should say. And listeners, thank you for joining us. As Robin mentioned, she is doing a series, a Bright Talk series around CX transformation. Actually, you can already listen to the first one. That's on demand, and it's on enabling technologies for agents. And then you can join us on May 10th at 11 Eastern, when she'll be doing a session on self-service, and then wrapping up that series on May 26th with a session on the sort of the where's and why's of live interactions. And of course, be sure to check back with us for new MetriSight episodes. We publish them bi-weekly or roughly bi-weekly. So everybody, till next time, so long.
Thank you.